The Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Today, we're going to break down the top wide receiver matchups, breaking down our slot versus wide points per game allowed tool over on Razzball.com. So tune in to find out who has the best out wide, slot, and who has the worst inside and outside matchups. All this and more on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, starting right now. And it wouldn't be a Friday without Ben Wasley. Go follow him at Fantasy First Down No on Twitter. What's going on, Ben?
What is happening? Happy Thanksgiving. I am thankful for Raheem Mostert nailing a couple of touchdowns for me. I've got him in a couple of leagues. I'm thankful for Bobby for having me on the show today and all he does for the Razzball community around the place.
Thank you, man. Honestly, if you were thankful for me, I would just end the show. Be like, that's it. I can't do this. I need at least some praise. All right.
It's in my contract. I have to do it.
I'm glad you read the fine print. You know what I mean? Actually, that's like the bold. That's like the first sentence. You got to praise Bob right at the top. Yeah, man. No, I love it's been fun. Like, we've seen 4 games already. The Thanksgiving Day slate wasn't the best from a NFL game standpoint. There was a lot of blowouts, but I love it for fantasy. There was so much going on. Unfortunately, I sat Jared Goff for Brock Purdy. That will continue to haunt me every single week. I think I've gotten it wrong 3 straight weeks, so that's always fun. But I have Mostert in a couple leagues. I actually faded Waddle, unfortunately, but he went off against the Jets because why not, right? Waddle can't play well against good matchups, but against the worst out wide matchup, he goes for 100 because 2 + 2 equals red banana. I don't even know what that means, but that's how ridiculous it is. But any quick thoughts about how the weekend went so far?
Look, I think a couple of guys got very lucky. Garrett Wilson, like blowing up in garbage time, was super lucky for Garrett Wilson owners, and hence not me because I played against him in 3 leagues. That was the big one for me. Brandon Ayuk having a really quiet game while Debo went off and CMC went off was interesting. It just seems like in San Francisco, we can't have like all 3 guys having good weeks at the same time. It's like you get like 1 or 2 of Ayuk, Debo, and Kittle, but you can't have all 3 because that would be asking too much.
You know what? Ayuk, he caught the touchdown, right? And that's all that matters. But I laughed because he caught it and he got hit. If he falls 1 yard sooner, that day looks a lot different for him, but he found the end zone, which is great. Debo looked good, and then Purdy doesn't do well, right? It's funny how, because Debo got the rushing touchdown, CMC got 2 rushing touchdowns, and, of course, Seattle, with all their issues, no Kenneth Walker, Geno dealing with his arm issue, just couldn't get enough going against that 49ers defense. And the irony is, going into this week, we probably thought the same thing about the Lions-Packers game. Thought Goff was going to probably be dominating on the ground. Goff might not need to do much. Sure enough, the Packers come out, punch him in the mouth at home on Thanksgiving for the Lions. That's crazy, but still, a lot of fun. I love all the slate. Even today, the Jets offense with Tim Boyle, hey, listen, they should have Aaron Rodgers. It's not the Jets' fault. Aaron Rodgers had a freak accident, 4th snap of the season, but man, it's a lot. It's a lot to watch. They should just go all in. Just saying, all right, Tim, you're gonna throw the ball 50 times, and we're just gonna see how it goes. Because everybody's geared up against the run, and so they can't run. And so it's like, well, you know what, Tim? Let's see what you got, kid. Trevor Siemian, you're on deck. Let's just figure it out. At this point, we're losing anyway. 5 straight. Go all in, throw it 1,000,000 times, see what happens. And then hopefully they start respecting the pass, and then Breece Hall can dominate. All right, enough about the Jets. I don't even know why. That's how you lose followers. Just talking about the Jets.
Talking about the Jets?
Instead,
with Giants stuff in the background?
Yes, I know. I'm just a disaster. New York disaster over here. Let's talk about the slot versus wide matchups. Today, we're going to go back to our old format and talk about the top matchups. Now, some of them already happened. If you were lucky enough to check out the slot versus wide tool, the Cowboys were a great matchup against the Commanders. Brandon Cooks had a great game out wide. Was a solid play. I was able to start him in a few leagues. We did see on the flip side, we did see Jalen Waddle play really well against the Jets. So it happened both ways. Waddle came out. I think there's a lot to do with the squeaky wheel, right? 2 days before the game, Waddle's talking about his role, how he's basically like, yeah, when Tyreek's not in, I get my looks. And then sure enough, they come out the next day, he's getting all the looks. I love how that works. But It is what it is. But we're going to talk about the top out wide matchups first. Now, there's a couple notable ones still available for Sunday's slate, and let's talk about those right now. It's the Carolina Panthers going up against the Tennessee Titans. We also have the Rams against the Cardinals, and then the Steelers against the Bengals. So those are some of the other top 5 out wide matchups still up on the slate for Sunday. So let's get into the Panthers versus the Titans. Now, the Titans over the last 6 weeks have allowed the most fantasy points out wide. This has been a smash spot for outside receivers. However, the Panthers aren't known for their outside receivers. They're known for Adam Thielen. So what's your thoughts here, Ben? Are you still leaning Thielen anyway? Are you going to give one of these guys a shot in redraft or DFS?
No, is the simple answer. I mean, look, I really like Jonathan Mingo coming into the season as a talent, but didn't have high hopes for him actually coming into the redraft season. I think it's played out that way. It's just that classic situation of a rookie coming into a bad situation with a bad O-line and a quarterback that's not quite getting it together yet. I really can't see any reason why you'd start him, even if he is probably more likely to outscore Chark. Chark does have the more upside. He does have 3 touchdowns this season. He's making big plays on the rare occasions where Bryce Young actually makes a big play, but I really wouldn't be touching either of them unless you're absolutely desperate for just some random, unusual DFS deep play. Chark may be an option there.
So when we talk a lot about CeeDee Lamb and how he, even though plays a lot in the slot, he's targeted so much, he gets more targets out wide than the guys who line out wide because he's just the guy. That's kind of the same situation here with Adam Thielen. Over the last 5 weeks, Adam Thielen leads the team in out wide targets with 19, which is tied with Jonathan Mingo. Now, granted, only about a third of his targets are from the out wide position, but he gets so many more targets that he's going to get the most out wide targets anyway, even though he plays a third of his snaps there. So when I was looking into this, the Titans are an air yards defense. If you were going to take a DFS dart throw, that screams DJ Chark, right? But to be honest with you, from a redraft, even in a DFS standpoint, especially DraftKings, full PPR, Adam Thielen's the play. I think even though the Titans have proven to shut down slot receivers and their metrics show that, Adam Thielen plays enough out wide, sees enough targets out wide to still be the guy. So I think after all the research, everything I'm looking through, I think Adam Thielen's still a solid start in redraft. Maybe you just fade the situation in DFS. But overall, I think DJ Chark would be the one guy I would probably throw $3,000 on as a dart throw in this matchup if you need something there. All right, let's jump down to the next one. It is the Rams versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals give up the 4th most fantasy points out wide over the last 6 weeks. Now they get the Rams again. Now, this is a rematch. In the earlier game this season, Cooper Kupp dominated this game, and Stafford didn't have to do much. He barely threw in that game. Puka Nacua only had 4 catches for 26 yards. But the question is, can he bounce back? Is he someone you want in your lineups this week, Ben? What about Tutu Atwell? What's your overall thoughts about this out wide matchup against the Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah, look, I think he kind of stumbled upon the real idea there, which is that the Cardinals were terrible last time these teams played. The Cardinals have been terrible offensively at times this season, but they've got Kyler Murray back, and you'd expect that makes this a high-scoring game. And for that reason, you'd expect the Rams to pass a little bit more. So the Cardinals have been a team that teams have really run on easily, but they can pass on them, and I think they're going to have to a little bit more if the game's a bit closer. I know Vegas has this as like a 1.5 point split or something along those lines, so it's going to be close. And that means good things for both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, who looks like he's going to play now. I've got both of them as top 10 options. I'm starting both of them. The interesting thing is that Nacua has 9 red zone targets, but only 1 touchdown, which is really strange. He's getting basically a red zone target every game, but he's only got 1 touchdown from there. He does have 3 total touchdowns, but he's got to get regression in that area. I expect them to start using him a little bit more in the red zone. Cooper Kupp's obviously going to get his red zone looks as well. Kyren Williams coming back is a little bit scary. They're probably going to give him a couple more carries than they would have otherwise. It was just Royce Freeman. But Nakua's getting 7 targets a game. I feel like he's just someone you've got to be starting at the moment. And Kupp's a start. You've got to start Kupp no matter what the matchup is. It's possible one of them will have a down game. I can't imagine they both have a down game. I just feel like if you leave him out of your lineups, you're risking giving up 20, 25 points that either of them could possibly put up.
Yeah, and the situation with Cooper Kupp too is like he's still kind of dealing with an injury as well. He got a foot sprain, and he looks like he is off the injury report, which is interesting. Full practice on Friday. Okay, all right, Cooper Kupp, good for you, buddy. Catching up on some things from the holidays. Sounds like Cooper Kupp doesn't have an injury designation, so that's good. Same thing with Puka Nacua. I think you're right. I think it's one of those things where the tide will raise all boats here. I know 4 for 26 isn't good, but when you look at Stafford in that game, he only threw the ball, I think it was 25 times because they completely boat raced the Cardinals. I think Kyler Murray infuses more offense for the Cardinals. It forces the Rams to throw more. I think Cooper Kupp, of course, is going to get his, but I think Puka Nacua is going to get his as well, making him a solid wide receiver 2 in this game. However, from a DFS standpoint, he's still very expensive. Like if you look at DFS right now, I think he's like the 5th or 6th highest priced wide receiver. So 2, 4, 6. And he's at 7,600 on DK. I don't see a game where he's going to get you 22 points with Cooper Kupp healthy. So I think I'm going to fade him in DFS, even in the plus matchup. And I think I'm just going to focus on him in redraft purposes because of his price there as well. Let's jump down to one. A little bit more meat on the bone here. It's the Steelers versus the Bengals. Now, on the flip side, this could be a game where because there's no Joe Burrow and the Bengals struggle to score, the Steelers, who have now shooken up, they fired Matt Canada. Mike Sullivan's now the OC, by the way, former Giants OC. Got to love that. I actually like Mike Sullivan. He's not bad. He showed some signs even with Tampa. He has been pretty good in the past as a play caller. I like this move for the Steelers overall, but there's a lot of change up there. So we'll see what that goes. But this is a top 5 matchup out wide for the Steelers. That means Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. What's your thoughts here, Ben? Are you taking a shot on these guys in redraft or DFS?
I think it's a really interesting one with the Bengals. There are a lot of changes, as you've said. The fact they don't have Joe Burrow anymore is going to make it harder for them to score, and that's only going to hurt their receivers. That's going to hurt the opposing receivers because it's possible the Steelers can just run out a lot of this game. We know they like to do that. We know they like to keep it on the ground, make sure that Kenny Pickett doesn't have to pass it too much. If the Bengals aren't scoring points, that would be perfect for them. Having said that, it's also worth keeping in mind that the Bengals have had a really tough schedule recently. And of course, with our slot versus wide analysis, we really only look at the last 6 games, and they've played all teams with winning records. We're talking about Bills, 49ers, Ravens, Texans, Seahawks. They're all teams that are going to be able to throw on you regardless of how good you are. So I think the Bengals secondary is actually a little bit better than we're giving it credit for. For that reason, there's a lot of things that point to Johnson and Pickens having quieter games potentially, not to mention the fact that George Pickens has sucked ever since Deontay Johnson's return. He's got one finish inside the top 44 since Deontay Johnson came back. And of course, they've had a couple of tough matchups with the Packers and Browns in the last couple of weeks, but at least Johnson was good in the 3 games before that. So I don't love either of these guys. Deontay's a wide receiver 3 for me. Pickens is a wide receiver 4. There's at least a little bit of upside knowing that this is a secondary teams have been able to attack, but I can't see why the Steelers would. When Warren's playing so well, when they've got Harris there as well, I can't imagine why you try to push the ball to Johnson and Pickens when you don't have to. So they're not guys that I'm targeting in DFS. They're not guys I particularly want to start. I'll start Johnson if I have to, but I'm basically avoiding all of these guys. I'm trying to sit Pickens in a 32-team league. That's how little interest I have in starting.
You know, it's funny. I typically... when you see a top 5 matchup, you're like, all right, and there's the OC change. Maybe there's a bump there. But you're right. When you look at the DVOA, which is basically FTN, formerly Football Outsiders, they do basically success rate of how good a defense is versus the run and pass. They're 13th against the pass, 30th against the run, which is a recipe that the Steelers want. They want to go Najee and Jaylen Warren. And I just don't know what to expect from the Bengals offense. And it's an AFC North games are already ugly. Now you factor in that there's going to be a backup quarterback. I honestly rather just avoid it. I know it's a top 5 matchup out wide. I agree, though, and think that the running backs are going to be the plays here for the Steelers. And I'm actually okay passing on this, even though it is a top 5 matchup on the outside. All right, let's jump down to our toughest out wide schedules. And everyone on here who's asked questions, we'll make sure to get to you in between we jump into the slot later as well. We'll get to you guys in a minute here. But we're going to talk about some tough out wide matches because there's some big-time names here First off, the Raiders, Chiefs. You got Davante Adams, Jacoby Myers. You have the Browns and the Broncos. Versus the Broncos, we have Amari Cooper in that scenario. The Falcons have the Saints. Now, there's big news that Marshawn Lattimore will not play in that game. So then you're looking at Drake London potentially being a solid option there as well. We also have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as an option with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin against the Colts, who have really turned it around versus outside receivers this year. So those are some of the notable tough out wide matchups this week. Let's get into the first one. It's the Raiders versus the Chiefs. Bottom 2 out wide matchup according to our metric. Now, Jacoby Myers has really taken a backseat, and I think it's kind of easy to fade him. But the real question is, are you thinking about sitting Davante Adams at all? Do you view him as more as a wide receiver 3, or are you just fading him in DFS?
This is one of those really interesting ones. Davante Adams, the last 2 weeks, 23 targets. That kind of suggests to us since the coaching change, he's now back to being the guy we thought he would be. Wide receiver 1 every single week. Got to start him. Having said that, the Chiefs has been a really tough matchup. They've really improved their defense. They've had to lean on the defense a lot because the offense is struggling a little bit, and they've been making that work. So they've been kind of just grinding out wins a little bit, which is not what we usually see from the Chiefs, but it's what's happening this season. Against the Raiders, you'd expect that this could be a really ugly matchup, low-scoring affair, a lot of running. So it's really difficult to rely on Adams, but those targets are there, and clearly if the Chiefs get a bit of a lead and do play like the Chiefs can play, they're going to have to throw to someone, and they're going to throw to Adams. That's clearly been the guy they've been targeting. Antonio Pierce has been very clear. Adams is our guy. We will throw the ball to him. He understands he needs to keep his best player happy, or Adams is going to want to go out the door, and the locker room's not going to be happy. So Adams is going to get his target. Myers, well, he's got 7 targets in the last 2 weeks. The last 4 weeks, his PFF receiving grade has been below 61, which is really bad. So I don't think that Myers is the guy that we thought he was earlier in the season. I think he's really struggling. I don't think he's going to get the targets. I don't think Aiden O'Connell has any interest in throwing to him. Not sure that Aiden O'Connell has any interest in throwing in general. So I feel like this is going to be a Jacobs and Adams game. And realistically, I don't want to start anyone else on the Raiders.
That's what it comes down to. Since the coaching change with Antonio Pierce, they have and honestly, it's even Aiden O'Connell. If you look at the game Aiden O'Connell started prior to the change at head coach, he also hyper-targeted into Davante Adams. I just don't think the offense as a whole is ever going to be pass-heavy enough. They're going to lean on Josh Jacobs, and they also are not going to throw enough to support 2 guys now. It's going to be Davante Adams only, right? So last season, Davante Adams 5 for 73, and then 3 for 124 and 2. I think Davante Adams will see enough targets to be a wide receiver 2 this week in a tough matchup. Now, am I paying up for him in DFS? Absolutely not. I have no interest in paying the premium for Davante Adams right now today. The Kansas City game, let's see. Where is he at? Oh, yeah, he's top 5 in price. And there you go. Get a little fuzzy again, of course, right on cue. But yeah, so that right there just tells me that I'm not interested. Jacoby Myers, I think he's droppable. I have zero interest in starting him at all right now. So I think from this standpoint, until I see Aiden O'Connell support Jacoby Myers, I am not going to start him at all. And honestly, at this point, if you need a handcuff, go get your handcuff. You could drop Jacoby Myers for your handcuffs. It's handcuffing season. If you have CMC, go get Elijah Mitchell, etc. I think you could do that. But Davante Adams, until I see the opposite, until I see Davante Adams not get like double-digit targets, I'm not sitting him even in tougher matchups against the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, let's jump down to the next one, folks. We have the Browns versus the Broncos. So really, it's Amari Cooper going up against a much improved. I've never seen a defense improve this much in one season halfway through as much as the Broncos. Now they have all these good corners. Patrick Surtain, we were worried about that early on in the season. Never happened. DJ Moore went off against them. But now you have Amari Cooper with a backup quarterback who has not played well with him. Is Amari Cooper a full fade for you, Ben?
It's a really tough one because Amari Cooper's looked really good this season. His PFF grade 76.3 for the season, which is fantastic. But with Dorian Thompson-Robinson in the 2 games he's played, his receiving grade under 60. He's just not getting the opportunities. The targets aren't on target at all. It's making him really hard for him. He had 8 targets last week, but his ADOT was 7, which is less than half of what it's been previously this season. So even though he's getting targets, they're not targets that are useful to him. They're not downfield, so he's not getting the yards with them. He's not able to catch half of them, so he's not getting the receiving points. It just makes it really hard to trust him to do anything. Having said that, He's Amari Cooper. He's really good, even when he's got a backup quarterback, and he's had backup quarterbacks throughout his career, and he's still managed to make plays over time. So for me, he's still a wide receiver 3, a low-end wide receiver 3, and that's mainly because there's so many teams playing. There's no players on bye at all, so you're not kind of having to be forced to start players. So I'm starting Cooper if I have to. I'm also really interested in what's going to happen with their third wide receiver spot. It seems to be Cedric Tillman, who I quite liked as a rookie coming out, but he hasn't had the opportunity. Now he's getting the snaps, but he's just running fruitless routes all day. So I wonder if that just means that more of the targets are going to be filtered towards Cooper, which can only help Cooper. If they actually put someone out wide that's going to get a few more targets, that would hurt Cooper. That hasn't happened so far. So for me, Cooper's someone that you can at least consider using.
Yeah. I just can't get on board with Amari Cooper right now because 1 for 16 and 4 for 34, and now he's got a really bad matchup. So it's just like the other thing with the Broncos is like their offense doesn't score a lot of touchdowns either. So I just don't see a scenario where you're dealing with a lot of garbage time. You're probably looking at a 13-10 game, probably a little bit more, but 13-10 last week with the Bengals Steelers, like that type of scoring in that game. So I'm sorry, the Browns-Bengals played last week. Sorry. Browns and Bengals was 13-10 or whatever it was. Anyway, whoever the Browns played last week, it might have been the Steelers. At this point, I can't remember. It's the Steelers, right?
It's Thanksgiving brain. We got Thanksgiving brain. You understand what's going on.
I got a lot of stuffing up there. Anyway. But basically, so anyway, Amari Cooper for me is like, if I could get away from him, I would. Like Nico Collins type players, I would start ahead of him. You know, honestly, I would even think about Odell Beckham against the Chargers, this type of player without Mark Andrews there too. I actually would like to take the upside of Odell versus Amari Cooper until I could see him do it with Thomas Robinson. I just, it doesn't seem like it's fun. I'm not going to do it. Or if he has a top 10 matchup. So go to the slot versus wide tool. If he has a top 10 matchup, okay, play Amari Cooper. I think he's more of a matchup dependent guy now than anything else. All right, let's jump down to number 3 on the slot, the out wide downgrades. It's the Falcons, which is Drake London. Now going up against the Marshawn Lattimore-less Saints. Does that change your thoughts here, Ben? Are you willing to give Drake London a shot with Desmond Ridder back at quarterback?
It really does, actually. He was someone that was very much a sit for me when I thought Lattimore might be playing, or really hadn't thought about it too much. But now that Lattimore's out, that makes a really big difference. Marshawn Lattimore has proven over the years to be a shutdown corner. He signed up with a lot of good number 1 wide receivers, and London is the clear number 1 receiver for Atlanta. Now he's going to get a lot more opportunities. Now, they have been trying to shift him around to he's been in the slot a lot more lately. He's played like a third of his snaps in the slot. I don't know if that's going to continue now that the Saints don't have Lattimore. It might be that they shift him out wide a little bit more. Also worth noting that in his last 6 Ridder games, he's averaged over 8 targets a game. So when Ridder plays, he gets a lot more targets than he has with Heineke, and that could help him as well. So even though you might have been disappointed by London the last few games, with Ridder back, I feel like this is a good opportunity for him to get right. For that reason, he's another wide receiver 3 for me. He's in that same range as Amari Cooper. He's probably got more upside than Cooper, but also a far lower floor, because we've seen that the Falcons are happy just to run out a game if they feel like they've got the lead and they don't need to try. Having said that, I expect them to be playing from behind a little bit against the Saints, and for that reason, I think London's going to get some opportunities, and I'm probably starting him in leagues if I've got the opportunity to, just for that upside.
Yeah, you know, and with Derek Carr's situation, sounds like he'll be back this week too. I actually kind of like Jameis Winston from a fantasy standpoint because he throws so many picks and he's just all over the place. It just forces more volume. It's awesome. Yeah, you know, the Marshawn Lattimore thing does throw a curveball in this, right? It's just like, was I excited to start Drake London before? No, but I think he's a wide receiver 3 now. You know what? When I'm looking at the numbers here, like it's just this year, like we haven't seen a game without Lattimore, right? So it's like, I want to see what Drake London did in the last year against them because I'm curious. I would normally have these notes ready, folks, but you know what? I decided it's Thanksgiving week. I'm just going to look it up on the fly. So you're going to deal with this a little bit. So is Ben. It is what it is. Last year, he had 7 for 70 and 5 for 74 against New Orleans. Okay. I like it. I'm in. I like it, Ben. I'm going to say Drake London. Nice start this week. All right.
Get on the train. Like it.
There, I'm in. All right. I'm very, at this point, Ben, this is the week to take advantage of me. You can tell me anything. I'm like, you know what, Ben, I'm going to go with Ben on this one. I like it. All right. Let's start with the next one here. It's the Buccaneers against the Colts. Now, the Colts defense under Gus Bradley has looked better. And so they have a bunch of young cornerbacks on their team. Some guys were out early on in the year, and it looks like they've picked it up. But I don't know. Doesn't intimidate me as much as the numbers say it should. That's why I feel like this is one of those matchups where you're not going to sit a stud like Mike Evans, but you might fade a guy like Chris Godwin. What's your thoughts here, Ben? Is that something you're thinking about, or are you starting both guys this week against the Colts?
Yeah, I was really interesting in this because earlier in the season, we were talking about the Colts as being a really good out-wide matchup. We were saying, well, they got Kenny Moore in the slot, so you definitely want to throw on them out wide. They have a lot of young out-wide guys. And so they're someone to target. And then Juju Brents got injured, Dallas Flowers got injured, and we thought, well, this should make their secondary worse. They're going to be really good to throw on. This is a fantastic matchup. And all of a sudden, they started randomly shutting down good outside wide receivers. They shut down Amari Cooper. They shut down Calvin Ridley. They shut down Chris Olave. They could definitely shut down the Bucs receivers. We know that Mike Evans is someone you can shut down. Marshawn Lattimore does it every single time he plays against him. The reality is that Evans may need to rely on touchdowns this game. Having said that, he's got a touchdown in 7 of his last 10 games. So it is a very good chance that he scores again in this one. But we do know he can be shut down against top secondaries. So it is one of those tough ones where it's like, do you see this as a top secondary? Well, you shouldn't, but the numbers say that it is. So it's really hard to know what to do with Evans. For me, he's a low-end wide receiver 1, but that's because he has massive upside. We know Mike Evans has these massive blow-up games where he goes for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns and things like that. That's just within the Mike Evans wheelhouse. Will it happen this game? Well, probably not. But do you want to sit him when he scores a touchdown or more? Well, I don't want to sit him when there's so much upside as well. So I feel like Evans is someone you kind of need to start, and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope everything's going to be okay. Chris Godwin's the really interesting one because when you think about the Bucs in the red zone, you think, well, Mike Evans. Mike Evans is massive. He's a giant. They're going to throw the ball to him. And you're right. Mike Evans has 11 red zone targets. Chris Godwin, 12 red zone targets for 1 touchdown. It makes absolutely no sense. They go to Chris Godwin in the red zone because he is pretty good at getting separation in those tight situations, but they haven't managed to use him. Evans at least has 2 touchdowns in the red zone. They've just been really poor in the red zone, especially given that Trey Palmer has 2 red zone targets and 2 touchdowns because everyone's going to Evans and Godwin. So it's really hard to know what to do with Godwin and Evans. You feel like the touchdown regression should be there, but it hasn't happened so far this season, and we're getting towards the end of the season. For that reason, for me, Godwin's kind of like a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2. I just need to see him playing better before I can start him.
Yeah, and the other thing with the Colts, when you dive into the numbers a little bit, they are an air yards defense, meaning you could beat them vertically. Maybe some of that's from early on in the year, but that's Mike Evans' specialty. I am not fading Evans at all. I mean, you're like, I don't know what to do with Mike Evans. He's a low-end wide receiver 1. It's like, well, then you know what to do with him. He's a start.
You got to start him. I don't want to, but you got to start him.
100%. I agree there. Chris Godwin, though, is just like 6 for 39, 4 for 54, 2 for 16, 5 for 54, 6. It's just like very bland numbers. PPR only, maybe a PPR wide receiver 3, but in half. I mean, I'd rather take shots on guys who have better matchups. Like Godwin, to me, is a matchup-dependent guy now. If he's a flex, a wide receiver 3, I like to play the matchups with him. And the way the trends are going, I'm not fading. Like, who would have thought Baker Mayfield would have been the one that said, you know what, Mike Evans is the guy, and I'm going to only feed Mike Evans. Like, Tom Brady at least shared the wealth with everybody, and Mike Evans was like equal footing with Chris Godwin, and that's how people drafted it this year. They were like right next to each other. And sure enough, Mike Evans is wide receiver 1, Chris Godwin's like a wide receiver 4. It's like wild. So I think I'm just going to go with that. I think if nothing changes, I think Mike Evans is in. And honestly, I think you can play Mike Evans in DFS. I think that's the air yards against the Colts. I'm just not interested in dealing with Chris Godwin at all. Unfortunately, it is what it is. All right, let's get some questions in before we go finish the song with some slot matchups here. As a Giants fan, Endorphins, how you doing, buddy? Always a pleasure. I'm thankful to share the New York football market with the Jets. Yeah, right? Isn't it nice that the Jets always end up, even though their record's better, they somehow are a bigger disaster. It's fantastic. And Aaron Rodgers just waiting around, trying to come back to an Achilles injury, and the Jets can't even win a game to give everybody hope to bring him back. So that's always fun. All right. George, play 01. Hey, guys, I'm 9-2, already in the playoffs. Congratulations, George. We like to hear that. Should I trade Tank Dell for Justin Jefferson? My other wide receivers are Cup, Waddle, Olave, Deontay, and JSN. Ben, what's your thoughts here?
Yes. Is the answer to that question. Yes, definitely you should trade for Jefferson. If you're 9-2, you're willing to risk the next couple of weeks. Jefferson's back practicing. He's got a couple of limited practices this week. Probably won't play this week, but that's fine. You're 9-2. You don't need him to play this week. You've got plenty of other options that you can use, especially now that Cup's healthy. And presumably you probably started Waddle already. So for that reason, I'd go for the upside of Jefferson. I do really like Tank Dell. He's my wide receiver 7 this week, but I would definitely trade him for Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson was the first pick in most fantasy drafts this year, and he hasn't gotten less talented. And even though Kirk Cousins isn't there, we've started to see that Joshua Dobbs can run the offense enough that there probably will be enough volume for Jefferson to at least be a wide receiver 1 of some sort.
So the Texans have the Titans twice in the playoffs. And then they have sandwiched in there the Browns, which is like, So, yeah, I think the issue is like Justin Jefferson's not going to be Justin Jefferson, right? But the question is like, what does Justin Jefferson with Josh Dobbs look like? Is he still a low-end wide receiver 1? Well, that's kind of what you're getting with Tank Dell right now. So I honestly don't – I know this sounds crazy, but I think I would just ride the wave with Tank. Like, I don't know if Justin Jefferson's hamstring, like they've been kind of pushing it off. He's healthy, great. He comes back. He re-aggravates the injury. It is what it is. Plus, Josh Dobbs, he's a nice player, but Dobbs runs a little more. He throws to his tight ends a shit ton more than Kirk Cousins did. And honestly, I think you might get maybe a little more production from Jefferson. But I honestly have zero interest in taking that risk. I'm going to stick with the guys. I'm going to dance with the girls that got me there, all right? Or who I took, whatever the saying is, all right? I don't know.
The weirdest metaphor I've ever heard.
You just go dance with the girl that you went to the dance with, all right? Don't go pick up another shit like Justin Jefferson. There you go. You got it. All right.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Eric Rojas. Here we go. Diggs has let me down 2 weeks in a row now. Am I wrong for sitting him and starting Tank Dell this week? So sitting Stephon Diggs for Tank Dell. So Dell and let's just look at the matchups here. So we have Buffalo
Dell
going up
against the
Philly,
Jaguars.
and then Dell against the Jags. What's your thoughts here, Ben?
I mean, I've got Diggs as my wide receiver 6. I've got Dell right behind him. For me, I'm probably ideally starting both of them, but presumably you have someone very good that you're starting, maybe a Tyreek Hill or an AJ Brown or something like that, which will be a situation for a lot of Tank Dell owners. I'm still starting Diggs. There's so much upside in a game that could be a massive shootout. We've seen that Diggs is the clear target hog in Buffalo. Tank Dell, you just don't know what's going to happen week to week. He has had a couple of really big blow-up games, and that gives him a lot of upside. But we still have Nico Collins back. There's still Robert Woods there. There are enough other targets that you can't necessarily rely on it. And it is a tougher matchup comparatively. So I'm going with Diggs.
I'm going with Diggs too. The Eagles are a good matchup and that game should be, I mean, the Eagles are going to score against Buffalo. They're banged up. And then I just think that Diggs is going to get his. And this is the other thing. Like Diggs, Diggs is in Josh Allen's ear. Back-to-back bad games. Hey, man, no, I'm not sitting Stephon Diggs. No, thank you. I'm playing him. Anyway, but I do agree, though. Get Tank Dell in your lineups, too, against the Jags. This is a good matchup as well. Jamie, what's going on? Oh, wow, look at that. My man Bobby and his partner in the Weekly Announced. Appreciate Jamie. Always a pleasure, man. He talked a little bit about the Jets and Bills matchup last week. Khalil Shakir had a very big game against the Jets last week. Obviously, some of that has to do with Michael Carter potentially being out. He got banged up last week's game. So maybe the slot quarterback for the Jets, that helps a lot. But Shakir, yeah, I mean, the other way to use the slot first wide tool is we do give you percentage of fantasy points scored, right? So it's not just how many fantasy points a defense allows, maybe necessarily. But like, for example, the Jets allow the 9th highest percentage of fantasy points to the slot. So yes, they're a very good defense. But if you just look at the offense as a whole, if you know they're playing a good team and they're top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the slot percentage-wise, maybe that's another way to look at the analysis too. So it's tough. I understand. We try to give you the information as best we can, but there's other ways to look at the data. Obviously, Josh Allen's good enough to get one of those guys on. I mean, listen, Stephon Diggs does nothing. Gabe Davis does nothing. And then Jalen Waddle goes for 100 yards this week with Tyreek Hill. I don't know what to tell you, man. That's why they play the game. It is what it is. All right, one more before we get out of here. JB says sometimes you got to move on if she's not putting out. That's true. But Stephon Diggs will put out this week. I think that's what's going to happen. All right, that's going to be good. All right, we got Jalen Warren. I got Waddle on my mind. Jalen Warren or Nico Collins, start sit. What do you got, Ben?
Collins. It's PPR. PPR, I'm always going to lead towards the receiver if it's even close. Collins, it's not a great matchup. Warren, we have no idea what's going to happen there. You think probably he's going to get a lot of carries, but I don't trust that at all. So I'd go with Collins simply because he is the receiver.
I don't want to say it's take lock against Warren, but I have a very hard time knowing when that long one's going to break, right? Like he broke a long one. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. That's what he did. And he scored a touchdown on like a 60-yard run. The rest of the game, he didn't do anything. And it's like, all right, well, I was wrong. The other thing with Nico is Nico taking a full step back. Like early on in the season, Nico was the guy. But it seems like Tank is now the guy. And, good news is that Noah Brown's out. Man, I don't think I'll ever get a Jalen Warren take right. Ever. So I would like to pass, but I'm gonna say Nico Collins because I don't think I'll ever get a take right there. So good luck. Honestly, I don't know. All right. Ben, we're 36 minutes in. We're gonna run through these pretty quick here. Obviously, instead of going game by game, Ben, we're gonna make this real simple so we can get to your streamers and stashes. We have the Colts, Bucks, Bills, Eagles, Patriots, Giants, Patriots, Jags, Texans. Give us, those are your top 5 slot matchups. Does any of these really stand out to you as a player who's a must start in a prime slot matchup?
There's actually a couple which you'll be unhappy to hear because it means we're going to talk briefly. So, look, Josh Downs, firstly, was the first one, and I do really like Josh Downs. The Bucs have conceded 20.7 points per game to the slot. That's a lot. Josh Downs, primarily the slot guy. He's been battling a knee injury for the last few weeks, but he's had the bye week off, should be healthy in week 12. For me, he's a wide receiver 3. I really like the upside. A lot of you are going to have him available to come off the bench. He's someone you can slide in instead of someone like an Amari Cooper, especially in PPR. Khalil Shakir, we just talked about Shakir. We got very lucky last week, had a big game. After 5 totals in the first 6 weeks, he's averaged 4 targets a week the last 5 weeks. He's playing 75% snaps consistently. He's running a lot more deep routes. He's very boom bust, like him in DFS, not so much in redraft, but if you're desperate, and I am in a couple of deep leagues, you just have to start him. Wan'Dale Robinson losing a lot of snaps to Paris Campbell. His ADOT's only been over 5 once this season. He is a sit. I know he'll have some good games, but he's a sit unless DeVito starts to use him more. The one I like best, though, Christian Kirk, for the same reasons as always. There is some risk he's going to lose some 12 personnel snaps with Zay Jones returning. We didn't see it last week, but it might happen. Texans getting in a lot of shootouts. This could be another shootout. But he hasn't had over 6 receptions in a week since week 4. So while there's plenty of upside due to the matchup, I don't trust him. He's a low-end wide receiver 2 for me, but I feel like you probably still have to start him because there is so much upside.
And he's not been good against Houston. 2 for 21 and 1 for 11. So just to run through I'll do my quick spiel. Colts, Josh Downs dealing with that injury, right? And like we've seen over the last, prior to the bye, they didn't use him a lot because he was active, but he wasn't out there. So he became a dud in back-to-back weeks. I actually don't have a good information right now on his injury and if he's actually fully healthy again, because we're seeing Isaiah McKenzie out snapping him. So that's something to keep an eye on. Up until join us Sunday Live. We'll probably have more information there, but that's worth noting there. Khalil Shakir has really emerged over the last few weeks. I think a lot of it's tied to the Dawson Knox injury. I think a lot of people, we all see Dalton Kincaid is key. He got his, but I think Khalil Shakir got the biggest bump because now there's less 2 tight end sets. He's on the field a bunch more. and it's easier to take away Gabe Davis and that outside threat. And then when you have Stephon Diggs on the other side, you have that slot guy, which is nice to have as a backup there as well. So I actually like Shakir as like a dart throw, DFS play, love him to death. Get him in your lineups. He had a great game against the Jets last week. Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, the problem with the Zay Jones factor is that the other wide receiver was Tim Jones. Tim Jones was not getting any targets. He was getting 2 targets, maybe 3. Zay Jones is on par, whether we want to admit it or not, in Trevor Lawrence's eyes. When Trevor Lawrence lays down, writes his little notes in his diary, he writes about Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and Zay Jones all together. They all get their hearts around their names. And that's a problem, especially because there's not going to be a game where you're going to see Trevor Lawrence throwing for 400 yards, 300 yards to support 4 really good players. So Evan Ingram took a step back. Christian Kirk took a step back. Calvin Ridley got a good game last week. Zay Jones is going to be a problem. So I think you got to play the matchups. The good news is this is a good matchup for Christian Kirk in the slot. So I think he is a viable wide receiver too if needed. But, man, it does make you wonder if this is going to be a problem rest of season, as Zay Jones is probably going to be the best play. Fantasy playoffs are going to run around, and the irony is the best player will probably be Zay Jones. So maybe he's worth a stash. Segue, perfect too. Maybe a streamer and stash this week, Ben. Why don't you close out the show with your streamers and stashes?
Funny you said that. I actually had him down as a stash a couple of weeks ago as well. So hopefully you got Zay Jones on your roster. Other guys I like this week. Well, I talked about Jordan Love. I said he was my favorite QB streamer. And guess what? He balled out. He got you like nearly 30 fantasy points. You are welcome. And he was rated in consensus as like the QB 19 as well. So really happy with that play. Also this week for your QBs, big fan of Josh Dobbs. He's inside my top 10 now. I just feel like there's a lot of upside in this matchup, so consider Josh Dobbs. Other interesting plays, Jerome Ford, like him as your running back. Zay Flowers is an interesting wide receiver option. He's not getting the touchdowns, but especially in PPR with no Mark Andrews, I really like his upside as a play this week. And David Njoku, 15 targets last week. And now they're playing the Broncos, who give up the most targets to tight ends so far this season by a lot. That's a really good recipe for success. Now, having said that, David Njoku has been disappointing me for 5 years or something like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if he has a shocker. But everything says David Njoku is a good option. So if he's someone you can start and you don't have a good tight end option, I think he's a good option there. The last streamer I had was Khalil Shakir, but we've already talked about him. So I'll leave that out there.
All right, we got one more question before we close the show, Ben. Daniel comes back again. Amari Cooper is a questionable start, so he decided to maybe pivot. We got Devin Singletary with Damian Pierce coming back here. We also have Deontay Johnson going up against Cincinnati, and Shaheed against Atlanta. And that's an interesting one because Atlanta is a slot funnel defense, and also without Michael Thomas, more targets can go his way. What's your thoughts here, Ben?
Really briefly in each one. Singletary, he was taking over from Pierce weeks before Pierce even got benched. We knew Singletary was coming. He was someone I put as a stash about 5 weeks ago. So he was always going to take over. This is going to be a committee now. He's probably going to get about 60% of the carries. That's not going to be worth it in Jacksonville. Shaheed, his snaps didn't increase last week. It was all A.T. Perry. Now he's going to get more touches, but he's not out on the field enough to really make me able to feel like I can rely on him. For me, he's more of a flex option, really low-end wide receiver 3. Deontay's my favorite. We talked about Deontay earlier. It's a little bit risky, but the upside's there and what could be a good matchup. I'd start Deontay over Cooper.
God. Yeah, you're probably right. I would say this, though. Shaheed's role is changing. He's now the number 2 in routes without Michael Thomas. That's the key.
He is.
Ben, I love you, but I'm looking right. Here we go. I got you right here. I have no problem. We could do it on the fly. So here is the PFF data that I have. So you can see he's like over the last 3 games since the injury. Oh, wait, what is this here? Why is Michael Thomas in here? What did Michael Thomas get hurt?
I think he's only been out for 1 game.
I thought they played a game without him.
Yeah, they did. Week 11. No, week 10. Week 10. They had a bye in week 11. So,
that's weird.
Week 10, Thomas played 2 snaps in week 10, and then he got injured.
Yeah, I don't know why that was weird. Yeah, I guess he is third, but he only ran 4 less routes than Olave and Perry. So
Yeah.
he's out there. He's out there. But yeah, you're right. That was weird. All right. Touche. But still, only 4 less routes than Olave and A.T. Perry. I mean, and he also has that slot role against, I don't know. Yeah, go Deontay. Honestly, at this point, I got to tell you, I got to just say happy Thanksgiving, folks. I mean, it is what it is. I hope everybody had a great holiday. Appreciate you guys all joining us today for this Slot First Wide points per game allowed analysis. And make sure you go to razzball.com and go check it out for yourselves. Literally, we're just here trying to tell you, hey, here's a bunch of really cool data. Go check it out yourself and use it for your start sits. We also have rest of season schedules now, guys. So make sure you go to football.razzball.com, click on the fantasy data tab, and you actually can see the rest of season schedules for players, who has the best out wide, and your trade deadlines are coming. So maybe you can make a trade beforehand using that tool to get your hands on some good players with good matchups rest of season. Once again, I want to thank my co-host today, Ben Wasley. Go follow him at Fantasy First Down, no O on Twitter, and myself at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. Go make sure you join us this Sunday for the Sunday Live Start Sit Show. We are out of here, folks.